Hi everyone, this is Daniel Gregg speaking. I figure I'm just going to do a little reaction video here and try to do as little editing as possible, therefore I don't spend any hours and hours on the video. So what I'm reacting to here is a video by, or not a video, but a webpage by Bill Mounce. He's a Greek scholar, and he's trying on this webpage to explain meatone, Sabbaton, or the phrase that we translate first of the Sabbaths. And I want to react to what he says here, okay? So I'll read a little bit and then I'll give the reaction. Okay, so this paper was written on January 17th, 2010 by Greek prof, and it's called Sabbath and Sunday, Sabbaton. Okay, so if you want to find it, you have to go home, blogs, Monday with Bill Mounce, or just type in meatone, Sabbaton, Bill Mounce's name, and Didache, and you'll find it. Maybe I'll put a link up in the video, but I'm trying to do as little editing as possible. So he says here, Acts 27 reads, on the first day of the week, meatone, Sabbaton, when we were gathered together to break bread, ESV. Okay, so my reaction to this is, well, he's quoting a translation to indicate the meaning of meatone, Sabbaton here, rather than just explaining the Greek words. So it kind of prejudices the outcome right off the bat. That's just my reaction to here, because of course the translation in English and the ESV comes historically later than the Greek, okay? So you got to kind of explain the Greek without the translation, or at least justify the translation by the Greek and not the other way around. All right, so he asks, there is an obvious question for the Greek newbie. Yeah, don't you like that demeaning little put down there? As to why Mia is translated first when we learned it as one. Well, yes, Mia means one. Well, we'll see if he can explain that, or if he explains it correctly. And why Sabbaton is translated as week when we learned it as Sabbath. So there's an admission here. We learn the word as Sabbath because it is the ordinary word for Sabbath. Okay, that's why they learned it as Sabbath in first year Greek here. Okay. All right. So yeah, why Sabbaton is translated as week when we learned it as Sabbath. Why first day of the week and not one of the Sabbaths? Yeah, why not, Bill Mounce? Doesn't that make sense in Greek? I mean, couldn't it be a Sabbath or a number one of the Sabbaths? And we'll see. Boy, it's hard to combat this sun here. Okay, so that's better. You can at least see me here. Okay, so we're just reacting to this here. Okay, so he says, part of the key is the nature of the word Sabbaton. Huh. What does he know about Sabbaton that's out of the ordinary here? I mean, doesn't it just mean Sabbath? Is it not as straightforward as one might expect? A quick perusal of BDAG shows these options. So let's see. He's going to look in a Greek dictionary, BDAG, admittedly the best one out there, but I mean this dictionary is a 21st or 20th century product. I think this edition was in 2000. Okay, so Sabbaton is like 2,000 years older than that. Okay, can't we just recognize that it means Sabbath? Why do we have to use a recent dictionary? Okay, so the dictionary says the seventh day of the week, hence the Sabbath. Well, yeah, we expected that. Okay, and then he says it can be used in the singular but also in the plural. Yeah, Sabbaths, referring to more than one Sabbath. And here is the interesting part. In the plural, it can refer to multiple days, but it can also refer to a single day. Okay, so what's my reaction to that? Every time the word Sabbaton is used in the plural, the reference is to plural Sabbaths. Mounce won't be able to produce one text where the plural won't have significance, where it must mean singular. Now, how can I show this? All right, the usual idiom for the Sabbath day is day of the Sabbaths. Okay, so I used a plural right there, okay. Why did I use a plural? Because in the Greek, it's day of the Sabbaths. That's the usual idiom for the Sabbath. So what's the day of the Sabbaths? Well, it's the seventh day. Now, how many Sabbaths are there in a year? How many seventh days are there in a year? Well, in a solar year, we'd expect about 52 Sabbaths, right? Isn't that plural? So the day of the Sabbaths is the day on which the Sabbaths, plural, occur. So you see, the plural is not without significance. It doesn't, quote unquote, mean singular, okay? All right, so this plural versus singular argument is just a red herring. Okay, let's see here. What does he say? But it can refer to a single day. Okay, well, when they say day of the Sabbath, they're usually talking about a particular one, but the plural still isn't without significance. All right. He says, I'm going to talk over the traffic here. Okay, let's wait for these cars from the ferry to go by. It's like a plague of locusts, you know, when they come off the ferry all at once. Okay. He says, the attestation given in BDAG is significant, and the point really can't be debated. Okay. Like, attestation. Okay, so BDAG is like 2,000 years after the real evidence. Okay, there is evidently something idiomatic in how the word is used, such that a plural can refer to a single day. Okay, so he claims a mystery here. There's something idiomatic about how the word is used, such that a plural can refer to a single day. Well, he doesn't explain the mystery. I just explained it to you. It's day of the Sabbath in Greek. It'd be like saying, the day of the Sabbath is coming up, okay? Or you could say like the day of elections. The reason it's plural is because you have more than one, you have all the Sabbaths in view when you say it, a repeated, recurring thing that happens on every seventh day. So it's the day of the Sabbath, you see. So it has significance. Okay, but all he can say about that is there is evidently something idiomatic in how the word is used. Okay, so my reaction to that is, okay, so now he's created a mystery, which apparently he knows the answer to, but he hasn't told us. So how does this appear to the Greek novice? Well, something's not explained. Okay, prof, I'll just trust you. That the singular means the plural, even though my lion eyes tell me that there has to be something to the plural. I'll just trust it. Maybe just Greek is that way, isn't it? Okay, and we just got to trust you for the answer. Okay, so now he's got you in a trap because he can say other things about Greek, equally mysterious, and claim equally mysterious knowledge, and you won't be able to judge anything since you've set your objectivity aside. Okay, alrighty, so what else does he say here? Oh, definition 2 in BDAG. Weak. Again, it can be both singular and plural. And supposedly, or he's citing the lexicon, he cites Luke 18:12, Mark 16:9, and 1 Corinthians 16:2. Okay. Okay, so he's citing text which the scholars in the last 2,000 years have decided means first day of the week. So, isn't it kind of circular reasoning to use those very texts you want to mean first day of the week as the proof of your definition? That's circular reasoning. Okay, and in Luke 18:12, I'm just going off my memory here, but the Latin Vulgate translates, I fast twice a Sabbath. Okay, and some people even interpret that as people skipping 2 meals on the Sabbath. So there's nothing quite so obvious about this. And in classical Greek, you could translate it, I fast twice from the Sabbath. Okay, and you could translate it as a genitive of reference. I fast twice with reference to the Sabbath. You can do it a genitive of comparison. You can translate it, I fast twice more than you do on the Sabbath. If the other person fasts on the Sabbath, I fast twice more than you. Okay, because I fast 2 other days of the week. All right, so it's circular reasoning to put a particular opinion on the text and then say it supports your definition. And this is especially the case because in Koine Greek, the word for week is ebdome, okay, which is, if you want a word, okay, and even that's derived from a Jewish source because it's based on the word 7, okay. But in Koine Greek, there is no stock phrase for first day of the week. It didn't exist in Koine Greek. Okay, you would say, if you were a Jew, you would say 1 day to the Sabbath, if you were a pious Jew, or you would just say the first day, but you'd say it in Hebrew. Okay, there's no extant Greek from Josephus or Philo or any contemporary literature of any phrase meaning first day of the week outside of the supposed 8 usages in the New Testament. Okay, which are supposed by a later generation. It's not plainly obvious that that's what it means, okay? And just a little comment, I mean, if you want to look in the Anchor Bible by C.S. Mann and W.F. Albright on their Matthew volume, they will say exactly that there is no obvious meaning to this phrase from the contemporary language. Okay, because there isn't. Okay, somebody decided they thought what it meant, and then they put that meaning on it later on. Okay, reacting here. Okay, so yeah, Mark 16:9. That's a singular usage of Sabbath, but it's in the longer ending of Mark. Okay, which I don't think that's longer ending of Mark is genuine at all. I mean, it's a mishmash of the other passages. If you study it closely in Greek and where the sources of the text, you will find it's a mishmash of the other Gospels. And I have an appendix in the Good News of Messiah explaining that. 1 Corinthians 16:2, well, we discussed that in my last video. That has a context, and it means the first of 7 Sabbaths between Passover and Shavuot. Okay. So he has several examples. Prote Sabbatu. Okay, I already talked about that one. Oh, and then he says Mias Sabbato. Okay, Sabbath in the singular here. Mark 16:2, and then he has VL after that. Well, I think he's telling us to see some kind of manuscript variant here somewhere. Okay. Well, the scholars certainly don't support that in the critical editions. I mean, it's a very marginal reading. I'm not sure where he's getting that from, because I don't know what the abbreviation VL stands for. So in the plural, we see Mia Sabbaton, Amera, the first day of the week. Okay, so then he cites Matthew 28:1. Well, lo and behold. This is also circular reasoning because that's one of the passages that they've decided beforehand must mean first day of the week. Okay, Mark 16:2, Luke 24:1, John 21:19, Acts 27, 1 Corinthians 16:2. All right, so again, it's just the same 8 texts. It's circular reasoning. They don't have any outside contemporary information other than their say-so that it means first day of the week. Okay, so the big part of my reaction here, the big part of my reaction is that he's already admitted that Sabbath is the ordinary sense. Okay, well, if the ordinary sense makes sense, why seek any other sense? All right, so that's the question here. And of course, first of the Sabbaths makes perfect sense if you know about the Leviticus passage to count 7 Sabbaths between Passover and Pentecost. But no, he hasn't mentioned that at all. Like I said, they don't want to touch it with a 10-foot pole. They leave that passage hanging in the air. And of course, that passage and the fact that all of these usages occur between Passover and Pentecost gives us the necessary context to know which Sabbath is being talked about. All right, so he talks about the Didache here. Deutera Sabbaton kai Pempte. Okay, maybe Sabbaton. I haven't memorized the Didache text here. But okay, so now he's going to where clearly they're taking it as the 2nd and 5th days of the week. Okay, so that would be Monday and Thursday. Okay, so we'll just let it roll. I'll have to notice to see if it stops. Okay, so I'm kind of trapped on the corner in the sun and the light's disappearing here. Okay, so what else have we put in this reaction here? Oh, okay, so the Didache. We don't know the provenance of this text. It's dated variously between 90 AD and AD 150, AD 175. It's suspected to come from various sources, a compilation or a composition, with possibly some editing or updating over time. Okay, and the earliest fragment of this manuscript doesn't have Didache 8.1 in it. That part is lacking, so really we can't date that early fragment and then say that Didache 8.1 is contemporary with it. That wouldn't be proof of it. It could be part of the later composition of the text. But what I would say is that in every single usage of wherever you find it outside of Scripture, a miatone, Sabbaton, in a context where its authors want it to mean first day of the week, that they have derived this passage from their assumed meaning that they have put on the New Testament text. Okay, so it's like this. You were a Greek, you didn't know Jewish customs, you were a Christian, you were slightly Gnostic. Gnostics were the majority in the 2nd and the 3rd century. And somebody way back said, oh, first of the Sabbath, that just means the day after the Sabbath, Sunday, okay? Because we have our meetings on Sunday, right? Okay, so then this assumed meaning would get in there. And then every time they would see miatone, Sabbaton, they would think Sunday. Because they don't have an equivalent phrase in Greek. It wasn't, they could know Greek perfectly. Okay, Koine Greek perfectly. Okay, everything there is to know about Koine Greek. But they wouldn't know what this phrase meant because they've never seen it before, because it doesn't occur. They don't say first day of the week this way. They don't even say first day of the week in Koine Greek. They say that they'll say Kyriake in modern Greek. So the Greek language has changed, of course. Okay, but they have no background, so they just believe what they're told, okay? And of course, if they had no knowledge of the Torah, Leviticus 23:15 of counting 7 Sabbaths, well, they wouldn't think to connect it with that. And then they would get in their tradition, and the tradition would just perpetuate, you see? So all of the first day of the week usages of miatone, Sabbaton in the ecclesiastical literature descend from only these 8 texts and for the assumed meaning that they put on it. So they assumed, oh, this is what it means, first day of the week. So whenever they wanted to say first day of the week, they just said Meatone, Sabbaton. Okay, not realizing, because they didn't have a context and a background, that it could have another meaning. Okay, in other words, the first of the Sabbaths after Passover, or the first of the Sabbath days would be a better way to translate it. Okay, there are some arguments for it could refer to the plural of the 7 Sabbaths, but that gets a little more involved, okay, because then we have to talk about the gender of the word. Gender of Sabbaton is assumed to be a neuter word, but actually the "on" ending on the end of Sabbaton, is it automatically neuter in Greek? Okay, that's just kind of assumed. In Hebrew, it's feminine. Okay, Shabbatot. All right, but it's kind of assumed that it's neuter just from uh, an Aramaic calque of the word Shabta. Okay, Sabata. Okay, in Greek that looked like a neuter. Okay, so that's the probable reason why, but that doesn't mean that quote-unquote sense was continued in the Greek, or that people thought about it that way. You know, in ancient times, there was really no such thing as a study of grammar. You just knew language or you didn't know it, and there was no formality to it. And you know, people even in English assume all sorts of things about grammar until they go to grammar school and learn, oh, it's correct this way, and they just thought it was correct the other way. Okay, and of course, having all this education slows down our linguistic change quite a bit. Having mass media slows it down. Okay, but in those times, they weren't such sticklers about grammars. They paid more attention to context. Okay, so grammars is a catch-22. I mean, you can prove things from it, but then you can get tripped up by it too. All right. Oh, okay, so he says, also if you check BDAG on the Greek word for one, okay, now he's going to try to explain one. Okay, you will find that it can be a marker for something that is first. Hence, it has a wider range of meaning than just to be. All right, so he said what the lexicon said based on authority, but he didn't explain why. Okay, I've explained why more than once in my videos. The reason why is because in Hebrew, the cardinal number would be used as an ordinal, okay, the day one, okay, and then it would say the second day, the third day in Genesis, but day one would be the number 1 day, okay, and so it's the one in order, okay, the one, okay, instead of saying the first, you'd say one for the first in order, okay, so that's the explanation of it. It has an explanation from Hebrew, but when he was explaining Sabbaths, did he go to Leviticus 23:15 and try to explain that from Hebrew? No, he didn't. Okay. So he says, it is idiomatic. Okay, now he's going to explain the mystery. It is idiomatic that numbers are referring to certain days of the week. Okay, well, we talked about this assumption before. What if the numbers are referring to an enumeration of Sabbaths? Okay, I mean, after all, ordinary word for the Sabbath day, implied word day in there, day of the Sabbaths. That's the ordinary phrase for Sabbath. I mean, you study out the passages on the first day of unleavened bread, and you see that the word day is there in one text, and not there in another text, and that it still refers to the first in a series of 7 days of unleavened bread, or the first in a series of days on which they have unleavened bread, okay? And with or without the day, it still refers to the first day in that series, okay? And the grammar is exactly the same. All right. It explains, so this next comment explains why my definition in BBG, okay, that's probably Bill's Biblical Greek, I think maybe, I'm just taking a guess here, is Sabbath, week. So he puts the word week on here. The word has a wider range of meaning than might be expected. Okay, well, Circular reasoning again. He hasn't explained why the plain sense doesn't make sense. He hasn't explained, because he hasn't explained what I'm explaining to you about the first of the Sabbaths. Okay, he might know about it, but he would really get himself in a heap of hot water if he brought up the explanation that's really being countered here. All right. Okay, and then he says, the word has a wider range of meaning than might be expected. And when you see a gloss, gloss means definition. Okay, that's a technical word for definition. When you see a gloss like this for a Greek word, it should signal that there is something a little different going on. Okay, so often you get mistranslations when you use secondary definitions of words without sufficient basis for rejecting a primary definition. In other words, if a primary definition makes sense, why go to one that's less common? All right, so he's assuming a certain chronology and theology of the resurrection here. All right, and I think this is staple gone. I think, probably the word "this" is under the staple, but this should cause the Greek newbie to be respectful of the language. In other words, he's telling his listeners, I know your lion eyes tell you it's Sabbaths, and I didn't explain to you why one can really mean first. You just have to believe your lion ears, okay? Actually, the word one in Greek can mean one in an indefinite sense. One of the days of the Son of Man, okay? But he hasn't explained why it can't mean that in this context. There doesn't mean, it could mean one of the Sabbaths, right, or one day of the Sabbaths, or a Sabbath day. But the reason it doesn't is because the context of the first of the Sabbaths, and like I told you, the Hebrew, okay? And also the fact that the definite article occurs before the word one in Acts 27. Okay, the one of the Sabbaths, the number one of the Sabbaths. It's not an indefinite use, okay, of the word. Alrighty. Okay, so he's basically creating a foundation here for an argument from his authority rather than really explaining matters. Okay, the glosses you are memorizing in the vocabulary sections are only approximations. Okay, So, and even at that, they do not cover all the uses of the term. But even when you're putting approximations in, there are normal uses of words and uses of words that are unprecedented or have very little coverage in the original language. We call these words, like for instance, words that only occur one time in the whole Hebrew Bible, they're called hapax words. And then scholars have a very difficult time figuring out what they mean because they only occur one time. All right. In the first year of Greek, the day's trouble is sufficient. Okay, so their goal here is to bring people into the system. They want people educated so that they can look like they know what they're talking about. Okay, and so that they could take up the reins of the church and perpetuate the tradition. But they don't want them to know enough too soon while they're in their formative years and without being heavily invested in the tradition. They don't want them to question it too soon. So they just sweep the real issues under the carpet so you can't see them. Maybe later down on in their career somewhere or in their study or their ministry, they come across the real explanation, but then they just blow it off because they pass that time of life where they can learn something new. You can't put new wine in an old wineskin. It just doesn't work. Okay. All right. So he says, I'm sure Jesus was thinking of Greek class in Matthew 6:34. Well, that says the day's worries are sufficient for the day. Okay, not to worry about tomorrow. Okay. But part of second year Greek is learning to broaden your understanding of words and not to rely solely on your memorized glosses. Well, the reason we memorized glosses in the first year of the Greek is because that was the ordinary definition of the word. So if the ordinary definition makes sense to us, why would we want a secondary definition, even if we learned what the secondary definition was? All right, so then he's going to try to put the fear of God. He's going to try to put the fear of God in his audience here. Don't you dare try second guessing me. Quote, they are usually nuanced and sometimes idiomatic. And how dare you question that, because only we, the scholars, know what that is. And if you don't follow our advice, well then, you're a heretic. Okay. Then he says, the fact that every modern translation goes with first day of the week shows that here is an idiom at work. Now, isn't that an incredible statement? Because the modern translations translate it first day of the week, we now have proof that it's an idiom. Well, isn't that circular reasoning? It's reasoning straight from tradition, projecting it straight back onto the Greek meaton, Sabbatons. Okay? So then he states, and you know, it's almost as if he's aware of what the real debate is. Because he says, quote, and no theological doctrines should be drawn from this usage. After you assumed what it means. Oh, it has parentheses here. Other than the fact that the early church saw no conflict in worshiping on the first day of the week. Isn't that an assumption? Okay. They didn't worship on the first day of the week. They worshiped on the Sabbath. Okay. It was Sunday worship started in Rome and the Church of Alexandria after the Roman emperor banned Sabbath observance on the pain of death for Jews after the Bar Kokhba revolt. Okay, so he's just reading the tradition back in here as the foundation for his interpretation of the Greek. So this is circular reasoning, okay? It's reasoning from an assumption to a conclusion. All right, and then he ends his sentence here, and probably as a reflection of the significance of Jesus' resurrection on the first day of the week. So, okay, so we've covered Wednesday and Sabbath morning resurrection, and how this fits the 3 days and 3 nights and all of that. Okay, but this is just a reaction video to Bill Mounce's paper, and take it for what it is. Daniel Gregg, over and out.